The next question comes from the UFOs subreddit from EFH1. Can you comment on your work with Ken Shoulders and how his work is mentioned as ideal for further research in one of the OSAPTERs?
Oh, yes. At my Earth Tech International and Institute for Advanced Studies in Austin, Ken Shoulders is a brilliant researcher that I first ran into actually while I was still at Sanford Research Institute, where he was. And he was one of the best experimentalists I can imagine ever existing. I mean, he's sort of like another Tesla. And he had come up with a scheme whereby he was able to make plasma balls that held together even electrons, which ordinarily, if you try to push a lot of electrons together, their charge just forces them to take off. But he was able to build devices that actually concentrated them into little, actually circular distributions of intense electron charges. And so we looked into trying to figure out how could that possibly be, and so that took us into a whole new area of the possibility of quantum electromagnetic phenomena, what we call the quantum vacuum electron-positron distribution that underlies most of our physics. That if you dig into at that deep a level, you can get new effects. And it appeared that that's what he was kind of tapping into. And so we examined that from the standpoint of, well, is this a way to tap vacuum fluctuation energy that might be a new energy source? And got some evidence that might be the case, and even got a couple of patents on it. So that work with Ken Shoulders kind of got a lot of people looking at the possibility of, well, let's dig into the quantum vacuum that underlies everything and see if there's a way to tap some of the enormous energy that's there. And been unsuccessful so far, but there are a number of laboratories, Garrett Modell at University of Colorado, California Institute under Bernie Haish and so on. So people are going forth with experiments. So there's a possibility that there may be new energies to tap that would actually be useful as an energy source, for example, although success has not yet been achieved, so it's still an unknown. But nonetheless, that's where Ken Shoulders' work opened up a whole new area of research that I think is proving to be of some value.
So our next question comes from our UFOs from Holloway series. Based on your research, what is the single most compelling piece of evidence or data that suggests UAPs may not be of human origin? And why do you find it so significant?
Well, again, it goes back to this whole thing is that, Hal actually talked about this. You have signals that are present in an environment. You have electromagnetic signals. You've got, we got Wi-Fi all over the place, our cell phones. We've got mechanical systems that, show vibrations like the sonic. And then you've got, fermions. So you've got chemical signals. It seems that whatever signals that are making these people have these experiences, right, is not of normal things. You could put a Faraday cage, which a Faraday cage wraps you in a protective shield that no electromagnetics or no waveforms can come in there. Even when you do something like that, these signals end up coming in. So it looks to me as though these are something that is fairly beyond our capabilities to control. I mean, we know about entanglement, we know about these things, and it's very expensive to do these things, to do it out in the middle of a field, to have entanglement happen in the middle of a field seems to be well above our capabilities. And Hal touched on this, and it's like you just look at this thing and says, if we did have this technology, it'd be really cool. I mean, it would be great, but it just doesn't seem that we have that ability yet. And I follow the journals of the archives and all this stuff, and you would see some semblance of papers that come out to talk about this stuff, but you don't see that. Where if it does happen, it's happening behind the scenes with something that I can't explain.
Our next question comes from the UFO subreddit from ExoticCard. How can researchers get involved in this work, specifically in medicine?
So a lot of the times, what happens is that people get hurt when their observations, or they're, during that whole course of being involved in kind of UFO observations. Actually, making that available, with HIPAA in mind and everything, making that available to researchers is extremely important, and that's one of the things that I've been working with. Again, working with a medical professional, trying to get some of this data, get the MRIs, get all that information from people, boots on the ground, people that are actually observing this stuff on a day-to-day basis, millions and millions of observations as opposed to just a few observations. And, basically it's, get involved with in providing your data, obfuscated as possible and protected for privacy reasons, and get it out and get involved in some of the studies that are available.
That's great to know. I know there's so many people right now who are just itching to get involved, which is fantastic to see.
Well, I think it's important because I think it's important to notice that the Reddit organization is the place where people are coming to say, look, I've got an issue. I'm seeing things. I'm involved. So I think just being involved in the social media and putting your stuff out there is a great first step. I think it's amazing what's happening.
Our next question comes from the UFOs subreddit from EFH1. Are you familiar with the hair sample analyzed in 1999 and published in 2005 by Bill Chalker that may be evidence of human gene manipulation using mitochondrial DNA transfer? Would you be willing to look at this sample if it was possible to do so?
Are they talking about the one with the hair
I think so.
that
Yeah, they said a
was
hair sample. I'm
found?
I'm actually not familiar with this one, so.
I, I think it's the one where a hair sample was found after some
Mhm.
sort of an encounter, a nighttime encounter. I want to be very careful. But I've heard about it, and that there were claims about um, that the genetics of it suggested both an Asian and some other ethnic group, and I can't remember what the exact nature of it was. Somebody told me that, "Hey, we have the sample, we can give it to you if you want," and that was, I don't know, that was many years ago. Um, and I'm going to say the same thing is that I've said about other things is I'm not exactly the right person to do it. There are geneticists who do it, and you need a lot of money to do this. You can't just give it to somebody and say, "Oh, you're going to go here's the sample. Go and analyze it." Okay, well, doing a sequencing would cost you $10,000. Writing up the paper would cost you blah blah. Someone's got to do it, and who's going to do it? Same thing for the Peruvian mummies. I laid out how much I thought it would cost and the amount of effort to do it properly. So yeah, I could lay out what could be done, but there's amidst the Reddit community, there's probably 100 individuals there who could probably do it just as well. I found it insulting, not to me, but to the people, the scientists in South America, to say, "Oh, well, you got to get American scientists in here to do this." That's just garbage. There's plenty of great scientists all over the world. I mean, that's just letting daddy be in control.
Absolutely. And, that's another call out to the people in the community. There's so many different ways to get involved. Gary can't possibly do every experiment. So we
And organize yourselves. If you can ask the question, you can find other people interested in that question, raise money, find somebody who might be able to do it, learn how to convince a scientist to do it for you, or with you, or pay for the thing to be done commercially, and go from there. Citizen science has to be the way. I mean, and that really is the impetus again behind the Skywatcher group.
Our next question comes from the UFOs subreddit from Dave Lawn. If the connection to the source occurs via the Caudate-putamen and it is a vestigial ability, how can we revive this dormant capacity? What is the best method to achieve this, excluding the gateway method? And if it cannot yet be disclosed due to controlled disclosure processes, when will it be revealed?
Well, first of all, I know nothing about any controlled disclosure of anything, frankly. I mean, but sort of dissect that question about the Caudate-putamen. So the Caudate-putamen is a central nuclei in the brain, collection of nuclei. And nuclei in this term only means a collection of nerve cells that subserve a particular function. That processes almost all the data in your environment that the sensory apparatus can collect. And it tells the body how to move. In fact, 30, 40 years ago, people only thought that the caudate-putamen and basal ganglia were involved in movement, until people realized, well, to move, you need to know the world in which you're trying to move. And so you can't, so somehow that movement has to be associated with a processing center that knows what you want to do. And then it has to be able to build goals. And then they found out that it wasn't distributed across all of the brain, that goal forming and figuring it all out, and it is all processed subconsciously in the caudate-putamen. And the basal ganglia is actually thought of as now as the brain within the brain. So when you ask the question, where might such information be processed? That I was talking about, that glyph that seems to come, it somehow still has to be processed within the basal ganglia. So what better place for the antenna to be connected to than there? I mean, Hal was there when we had that aha moment looking at the data with Jacques Vallée and Kit Green. When we were looking at it, it was that aha moment that it was like, whoa, these individuals that have a higher density of these connections, actually, a couple of them were remote viewers. And so that was kind of the aha moment that, wow, they're actually at the top of the list, the top of the pile in terms of the connectivity. And so does it prove anything? No. But what it does, it's that correlation that says, this kind of makes sense. And so, I know of an individual who is doing experiments, and he has the capability to do these experiments in people to try to stimulate this area of the brain transcranially. And, so we'll see what the results are.
So this question comes from the UFOs subreddit from Wild Moonshine 45. It says, first, I appreciate your work that you've done with the UAP topic. Has any progress been made on the shadow biosphere research you mentioned last year? Are there any papers out on this topic you have completed and that are available?
No papers. I did, out of my own pocket, pay for a drone for this person to do more work on it. I've not been in contact with him any longer. His videos are all over Twitter. I forget his Twitter handle offhand. And that was what stimulated me. So there's nothing secret about that. But I did what I could to provide him a better drone or camera system. So I thought it was interesting. He had repeated videos of objects that looked weird. I mean, yeah, again, they could have just been something natural, but so the short answer is no. And again, I wish I had all the time in the world. I wish I had a whole research institute and I could people it with 15 professors who would feel completely free to work in this area. But setting up an institute at a place like Stanford, it's in the $50 to $100 million range before Stanford gets interested enough. Money does make universities come running.
Let's start with this question from our UFOs from Golden-Tate-Warriors. You've written extensively both on UAPs and on paranormal and metaphysical phenomena. What is your take on the relationship between these fields, if any?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big question and a hard question to answer. I definitely think there is a relationship. Um, it's really hard for me to pinpoint exactly what their relationship is, but there's incredible amounts of overlap. And when I wrote Surviving Death, which is the book I've written on the sort of consciousness element in 2017, it came out. I hadn't even thought about there being any connection to the material I had in that book to UFOs. Like, to me, they were completely separate topics. I think it was because I'd always just reported on the nuts and bolts aspects of UFOs. And since then, I've become much more aware of and more accepting too of the sort of high strangeness, paranormal aspects of the UFO phenomenon and how they all interconnect. And I don't have the answer of exactly how, but there's we know that, for instance, that consciousness is affected by encounters with UFOs, that consciousness play a role in how people, in the perception of UFOs. Here we've been talking about people that can call them in. People develop paranormal abilities sometimes after they have a UFO encounter. Certainly the experiencers can tell us that the experiences they have involves both physical components and consciousness components or psychic components, or however you want to call it. There's this fusion with UFOs of both realities. So yeah, I'm just looking at a few notes here. I mean, Whitley Strieber has done a lot of work on this, and he has situations where there are near-death experiences, which is something I've written about, where people encounter what look like gray aliens, or people that have UFO in close encounters or abduction type experiences and report seeing dead people within those experiences. So, I don't know how literally we can take all of that. We can't document any of that, but there does seem to be this crossover between also sort of principles relating to the afterlife and to the UAP phenomenon. So, I really think that, I certainly believe that consciousness functions independent of the brain. And I think I showed that very, very clearly in Surviving Death. And there is some kind of field of consciousness out there. There's some kind of field out there. There's other dimensions. And so the UAP could dwell in the same space or dimension as a lot of the paranormal phenomena that we observe, and a lot of experiences that people have with afterlife phenomena. I'm no expert on that. I just observe what everybody else observes, and I can't really say what it is, but I definitely believe more and more, and the more I learn, that there is some kind of overlap between them. And, the scientists here who have studied them may have more scientific explanations for, like Hal, who has looked at these things on a scientific level. But I'm just looking at it as a journalist and as observer, and as someone who's had my own experiences along these lines. And it's all a mystery to me how it interconnects. But I'm pretty clear, and personally, I believe that it does. And I think hopefully we'll learn more and more about that over time.